The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening in downtown Seattle. 17-year-old Jake pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders as he hurried down the wet sidewalk. The cold drops hit his face like tiny needles, and he could feel the water starting to seep through the holes in his worn-out sneakers. Jake had been living on the streets for 8 months now. It wasn't something he ever thought would happen to him, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. After his grandmother passed away last winter, the foster care system basically told him he was on his own. 18 was still a few months away, but apparently that didn't matter much to anyone in charge. His grandmother, Rose, had raised him since he was 7 years old. She was the only family he'd ever really known, and when she died, it felt like his whole world just disappeared. The small apartment they shared went back to the landlord, and Jake found himself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. But Rose had taught him something important during those 10 years they spent together. She always said that no matter how bad things got, you never lost your heart. You helped people when you could, you treated everyone with respect, and you never gave up on yourself. Those words kept Jake going, even on the hardest days. Tonight was definitely one of those hard days. Jake had spent the morning looking for work at various shops and restaurants, but the answer was always the same. No experience, no job, no address, no job, no phone number, no job. It was like being stuck in a circle that never ended. He'd managed to make $12 collecting bottles and cans from the recycling bins behind office buildings. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a small meal and maybe a hot coffee if he was careful with his spending. The plan was to grab something quick from the corner store and then find a dry place to spend the night. As Jake walked past Pike Place Market, the smell of fresh fish and flowers reminded him of better times when his grandmother would bring him here on special occasions. They'd watch the fish throwers and eat warm donuts while Rose told him stories about when she was young. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. The market was mostly closed at this hour, with just a few late vendors packing up their stalls. Jake was thinking about where he might find shelter for the night when he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. It was soft crying, barely audible over the sound of the rain hitting the pavement. Jake looked around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Most people would probably keep walking, especially someone in his situation who had enough problems of his own. But something about the crying tugged at his heart. It sounded scared and lonely, and Jake knew exactly what that felt like. Following the sound, he turned into a narrow alley between two closed shops. There, sitting on a wooden crate next to a dumpster, was a girl who looked about his age. She was soaking wet, her long dark hair stuck to her face, and she was shivering uncontrollably. What caught Jake's attention immediately was the white cane lying beside her on the ground, and the way her eyes didn't quite focus on anything. The girl was wearing expensive-looking clothes, a designer jacket that probably cost more than Jake had seen in months, and shoes that were clearly not meant for walking around in the rain. But despite all that, she looked completely lost and helpless. Jake approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey," he said gently, keeping his voice low and friendly. "Are you okay?" The girl's head snapped up at the sound of his voice. Jake could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Hope, maybe. I'm lost," she said, her voice shaking from both cold and fear. "I can't find my way home, and I don't know where I am." Jake's heart went out to her immediately. He knew what it felt like to be scared and alone, even if his situation was different from hers. "My name's Jake," he said, crouching down to her level. "What's your name?" "Lily," she replied, wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I was with my caregiver at some kind of street festival, but there were so many people and so much noise. I got confused and somehow we got separated. I've been walking around for hours trying to find her or find my way home." Jake looked at this girl, Lily, and saw someone who needed help. It didn't matter that he was homeless and barely surviving himself. His grandmother's voice echoed in his head. "You help people when you can." "Where do you live?" Jake asked. "Maybe I can help you get home." Lily's face brightened slightly. "Somewhere in Bellevue, I think." We live in a big house with a long driveway, but I don't remember the exact address, and I can't call anyone because I dropped my phone somewhere. Jake felt his stomach drop. Bellevue was on the other side of Lake Washington, at least an hour away by bus, and he knew it was an expensive area where rich people lived. Getting there would cost money he didn't have, and even if they made it, finding one house in that huge area would be nearly impossible. But looking at Lily sitting there in the rain, scared and shivering, Jake knew he couldn't just walk away. His grandmother would never forgive him if he left someone in need, especially someone who couldn't see and was completely helpless in this situation. "Okay," Jake said, making up his mind. "Let's get you out of this rain first, and then we'll figure out how to get you home." He helped Lily stand up and handed her the white cane. "There's a 24-hour diner about 2 blocks from here. We can dry off and get something warm to drink while we make a plan." As they walked slowly through the rain, Jake carefully guided Lily around puddles and obstacles. He'd never helped a blind person before, but his natural kindness and patience made him a good guide. He described what they were passing: the closed flower shop with its colorful awning, the old brick buildings, the smell of coffee from a late-night cafe. Lily seemed surprised by how thoughtful Jake was. Most people either treated her like she was helpless or acted uncomfortable around her, but Jake talked to her like she was just a regular person, which she appreciated more than he could know. "You're really good at this," Lily said, as they carefully crossed a street. "Describing things, I mean. Most people don't think to do that." Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. It had been a long time since anyone had complimented him on anything. "My grandmother always said you should pay attention to the world around you. I guess I just got in the habit of noticing things." When they reached the diner, Jake used almost all of his $12 to buy Lily a hot soup and coffee. He ordered just a small coffee for himself, telling her he wasn't very hungry. The truth was, he wanted to make sure she had something warm in her stomach, and he could always find food somewhere else later. As they sat in the warm, brightly lit diner, Jake realized that helping Lily was making him feel something he hadn't felt in months: purpose. For the first time since his grandmother died, he felt like he was doing something that mattered, something that would make Rose proud of him. He had no idea that this chance meeting would change both of their lives forever. The warm soup seemed to bring some color back to Lily's cheeks, and Jake felt relieved to see her looking a little better. The diner was one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floors. It reminded Jake of the diners his grandmother used to take him to when he was younger, where the coffee was always too strong and the waitresses called everyone honey. "This soup is really good," Lily said, taking another spoonful. "Thank you for buying it for me. You didn't have to do that." Jake sipped his coffee and shrugged, even though he knew she couldn't see the gesture. "My grandmother always said that food tastes better when you share it with someone." "Tell me about your grandmother," Lily said, her voice genuinely curious. "She sounds like she was a special person." Jake felt that familiar tightness in his chest whenever someone mentioned Rose, but talking to Lily somehow made it easier. "She was the best person I've ever known. She raised me from the time I was 7 until she passed away last winter. She used to say that being poor didn't mean you had to be poor in spirit." "What happened to your parents?" Lily asked gently. "My mom had some problems with drugs and I never knew my dad," Jake said matter-of-factly. "Rose was my mom's mother. She took me in when the state was going to put me in foster care. She worked 2 jobs to keep us going, cleaning offices at night and working at a grocery store during the day." Lily listened intently, and Jake found himself sharing things he hadn't talked about with anyone in months. There was something about her that made him feel comfortable, like she actually cared about what he was saying. "She sounds amazing," Lily said. "I can tell she raised you right. Not many people would stop to help a stranger the way you did tonight." Jake felt his cheeks warm at the compliment. "What about you? What's your family like?" Lily stirred her soup thoughtfully. "It's complicated," she said. "My parents love me, but sometimes I feel like they see me as this fragile thing that might break if they're not careful. They mean well, but they worry about everything I do." "That must be hard," Jake said. "It is. I lost my sight in a car accident 3 years ago. Ever since then, everyone treats me differently, like I'm not the same person I was before. Lily paused, then added quietly, sometimes I feel like I'm more of a burden than a daughter. Jake leaned forward in his seat. Hey, don't say that. From what I can tell, you're pretty tough. You were lost and scared, but you didn't panic. You asked for help when you needed it. That takes courage. Lily smiled, and Jake noticed it was the first real smile he'd seen from her all evening. You know, you're the first person in a long time who's talked to me like I'm just a regular person. Most people either talk to whoever I'm with instead of me, or they speak really loud like I can't hear properly too. That's ridiculous, Jake said. You can hear just fine. Better than most people, I bet. I can, Lily laughed. I can hear things most people miss. Like right now I can hear the cook in the kitchen humming while he cleans the grill. And there's a couple 3 booths over having an argument about money, but they're trying to whisper so no one notices. Jake looked around and realized she was right. He hadn't noticed any of those sounds, but now that she mentioned them, he could hear them too. That's actually pretty cool. It's like you have a superpower. I never thought of it that way, Lily said, grinning. Maybe losing my sight gave me other abilities. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both of them feeling more relaxed than they had all day. Jake was amazed at how easy it was to talk to Lily. Most of the time, he felt like people looked right through him, especially after he'd been living on the streets. But Lily listened to him like what he said actually mattered. So what's your plan? Lily asked eventually. I mean, for the future. Do you want to finish school? Jake nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him. Yeah, definitely. I was a pretty good student before everything happened. I want to get my diploma and maybe go to college someday. I know it sounds crazy considering my situation, but my grandmother always told me that education was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you. It doesn't sound crazy at all, Lily said firmly. You're obviously smart and you care about people. Those are the most important things. What about you? What do you want to do? I used to want to be a teacher, Lily said. But after the accident, everyone kept telling me how hard that would be, how I'd need so much extra help. After a while, I started believing them. Now I don't really know what I want. Well, I think you'd make a great teacher, Jake said without hesitation. You're patient, and you really listen when people talk. Plus, you'd probably understand students, who are struggling better than most teachers would. Lily looked surprised. You really think so? Absolutely. Just because you can't see doesn't mean you can't teach. There are probably lots of blind teachers out there doing amazing things. For the first time since her accident, Lily felt like maybe her dreams weren't completely impossible after all. This homeless boy who had every reason to be bitter and angry was encouraging her to believe in herself when her own family had given up on those dreams. Jake, she said suddenly, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Aren't you scared? Living on the streets, not knowing where your next meal is coming from? Jake considered the question seriously. Yeah, I'm scared sometimes. Especially at night when it's cold and I can't find anywhere safe to sleep. But being scared doesn't help anything, you know? My grandmother used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what you need to do, even when you are afraid. She really was wise, Lily said softly. The hardest part isn't the hunger or the cold, Jake continued. It's feeling invisible, like you don't matter to anyone. Most people look right through you when you're homeless. They act like you're not even there. Lily reached across the table and found Jake's hand. You matter, she said simply. You matter to me. If you hadn't found me tonight, I don't know what would have happened. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. It had been so long since anyone had told him he mattered. Thank you, he managed to say. They finished their food in comfortable silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Jake was thinking about how strange it was that he felt more hopeful after meeting Lily than he had in months. And Lily was thinking about how this boy had shown her more kindness and respect in one evening than most people showed her in weeks. When it was time to leave, Jake helped Lily with her jacket and guided her toward the door. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet and shiny under the streetlights. Okay, Jake said. Let's figure out how to get you home. Do you Remember anything else about where you live? Any landmarks or details that might help? Well, Lily said thoughtfully, I remember our house has a really long driveway with big trees on both sides, and there's a fountain in front of the house. My dad always complains about how much it costs to keep it running. Jake tried to hide his concern. A house with a long driveway and a fountain sounded like the kind of place where very wealthy people lived. He was starting to realize that Lily came from a completely different world than his. The bus ride to Bellevue was quiet at first. Jake had used the last of his money to buy Lily a ticket, and when she realized he was planning to walk back to the city alone, she insisted he come with her. She promised her family would pay him back for the bus fare, though Jake wasn't comfortable with the idea of taking money from strangers. As they sat together on the nearly empty bus, Jake stared out the window and watched the city change around them. The tall buildings and crowded streets of downtown Seattle gradually gave way to quieter neighborhoods with bigger houses and perfectly trimmed lawns. Even in the darkness, he could tell this was a different world. Jake, Lily said softly, I need to tell you something. My family, they have money. Like a lot of money. I didn't want to say anything earlier because I was afraid you might treat me differently. Jake felt his stomach twist. He'd suspected as much from her clothes and the way she talked about her house, but hearing it confirmed made him nervous. Why would I treat you differently? Because most people do. Either they want something from me or they act weird around me because they think I'm some kind of spoiled rich girl. But you've been so nice to me and I don't want that to change. Jake turned to look at her even though she couldn't see him. Lily, I helped you because you needed help. I don't care if your family has money or not. You're still the same person who was scared and lost in that alley. Lily smiled with relief. I was hoping you'd say that. As the bus got closer to Bellevue, Jake started to understand just how much money Lily's family really had. The houses kept getting bigger and farther apart, with gates and long driveways that disappeared into the darkness. Some of them looked more like small palaces than regular homes. How much farther? Jake asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. I think we're close. When we get off the bus, I should be able to find my way from there. I know the sounds of my neighborhood pretty well. They got off at a stop in what looked like the fanciest area Jake had ever seen. Even the bus stop was nicer than most of the places he'd slept in over the past 8 months. Everything was clean and perfect, like something out of a magazine. Lily took Jake's arm and started walking confidently down a wide street lined with enormous trees. This way, she said. I can hear the fountain at the Johnson's house, so we're going in the right direction. Jake couldn't hear any fountain, but he trusted Lily's hearing. As they walked, he kept looking around in amazement. These weren't just big houses, they were mansions. Most of them had security gates and cameras, and Jake could see expensive cars parked in circular driveways. Lily, he said carefully. Exactly. How rich is your family? She was quiet for a moment. My dad owns a big company. He builds computer software for other businesses. I don't really understand all of it, but I know he's pretty successful. Jake was starting to feel like he was in over his head. What was a homeless kid doing in a neighborhood like this? What would Lily's parents think when they saw him? His clothes were old and patched, his sneakers had holes in them, and he probably didn't smell very good after living on the streets. Maybe I should just leave you here, Jake said, stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. You know where you are now, and your house can't be too far away. No way, Lily said firmly, tightening her grip on his arm. You're not leaving me now. Besides, my parents are going to want to thank you for helping me. They've probably been worried sick. Jake reluctantly agreed to continue, but his anxiety was growing with every step. They turned onto an even more exclusive street, and Lily suddenly stopped walking. We're here, she said, pointing toward a set of tall iron gates with an intercom system. Jake looked up at what had to be the biggest house he'd ever seen. It was 3 stories tall with white columns and perfectly manicured gardens. There were lights on in several windows, and he could see the fountain Lily had mentioned, a massive stone structure in the center of a circular driveway. Lily, this isn't just a big house, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is like a palace. Before Lily could respond, the gates suddenly swung open and several people came running toward them. Jake instinctively stepped back, but Lily, called out happily, "Mom, Dad, I'm okay." A well-dressed woman with tears streaming down her face reached them first, pulling Lily into a tight hug. "Oh, honey, we've been so worried. Where have you been? We've had security teams looking for you for hours." Behind her came a tall man in an expensive suit, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Jake assumed this must be Lily's father. There were also several other people, security guards, Jake realized, spreading out around the area. "I got lost at the festival," Lily explained, still hugging her mother. "But Jake found me and helped me get home. I don't know what I would have done without him." For the first time, Lily's parents seemed to notice Jake standing awkwardly a few feet away. He felt completely out of place in his worn-out clothes, surrounded by all this wealth and these important-looking people. Lily's father approached him with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "You're Jake?" "Yes, sir," Jake said quietly, not sure if he should shake hands or what the proper thing to do was. "You brought our daughter home safely?" "I just helped her find her way, sir. Anyone would have done the same thing." Lily's mother looked Jake up and down, taking in his appearance. Jake felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, wishing he could just disappear. "Honey," she said to her husband, "look at this boy. He's just a child himself." "Mom, Dad," Lily said, stepping between them and Jake. "Jake has been taking care of himself for months. He's one of the bravest, kindest people I've ever met. He spent his last money buying me food and getting me home safely." Jake wanted to correct her. He hadn't been taking care of himself that well, and he certainly didn't feel brave most of the time. But something in Lily's voice made him stay quiet. Lily's father extended his hand to Jake. "I'm Robert Chen, and this is my wife Susan. We owe you more than we can ever repay." Jake shook the man's hand, surprised by how firm and warm his grip was. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Chen. I'm just glad Lily is safe." "Nonsense," Susan said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You brought our daughter home. That means everything to us." "Mom, can Jake stay for dinner?" Lily asked suddenly. "He hasn't eaten much today, and I want you to get to know him." Jake started to protest. "That's really not necessary. I should probably get back to the city." "How are you getting back?" Robert asked. "Do you have a car?" "I'll take the bus," Jake said, then realized he didn't have any money left for bus fare. Robert seemed to understand immediately. "You spent your money getting Lily home, didn't you?" Jake nodded reluctantly. "Then you're definitely staying for dinner," Susan said in a tone that didn't allow for argument. "It's the least we can do." As they walked toward the massive house, Jake felt like he was entering a different universe. Everything was perfect and expensive and clean. He caught sight of himself in one of the windows and cringed at how out of place he looked. But when Lily squeezed his arm and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving," Jake realized that maybe, for once in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Dinner at the Chen family table was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The dining room was enormous, with a chandelier that probably cost more than most people made in a year. The table could easily seat 12 people, but tonight it was just the 4 of them, which somehow made it feel even more overwhelming. Jake sat carefully in his chair, afraid to touch anything. Every piece of silverware looked like it belonged in a museum, and he spent the first few minutes just watching how the family used their forks and knives, trying to copy their movements. "Jake," Robert said as the housekeeper brought out the first course, "Lily tells us you've been on your own for several months. That must be incredibly difficult." "It's been challenging, sir," Jake replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But I'm managing." Susan leaned forward with concern in her eyes. "Where do you sleep? Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" Jake hesitated. He didn't want their pity, but he also didn't want to lie. "I find places. Shelters when there's space, or safe spots outside when there isn't." The silence that followed was heavy. Jake could see the shock on Susan's face, and even Robert looked troubled. Only Lily seemed unsurprised, which made Jake realize she had probably figured out his situation earlier. "You're just a kid," Susan said softly. You shouldn't have to live like that. I'm almost 18, Jake said defensively. I can take care of myself. I'm sure you can, Robert said diplomatically. But that doesn't mean you should have to. As they ate, Jake found himself relaxing despite the fancy surroundings. The Chen family was nothing like what he'd expected rich people to be. They didn't talk down to him or act like he was beneath them. Instead, they asked about his interests, his dreams, and his plans for the future. I want to finish high school, Jake told them when Robert asked about his education. Maybe go to college someday, though I'm not sure how I'd pay for it. My grandmother always said education was the key to changing your life. She sounds like a smart woman, Susan said. What would you want to study? Jake thought for a moment. Maybe social work. I've seen a lot of people who need help but don't know where to find it. Kids in foster care, homeless people, families, struggling to get by. I think I could make a difference. Lily beamed at his answer. See? I told you he was special. After dinner, Robert asked Jake to join him in his study while Susan and Lily went to the living room. The study was lined with books from floor to ceiling, and there was a large desk covered with papers and computer screens. Jake, Robert said, settling into a leather chair. I want to be direct with you. Lily hasn't been the same since her accident 3 years ago. She's been withdrawn, sad, and honestly, I think she's lost hope about her future. Jake wasn't sure what to say, so he just listened. But tonight she's more animated and happy than I've seen her in years. She keeps talking about how you treated her like a normal person, how you encouraged her dreams of being a teacher. That means more to us than you could possibly understand. She's an amazing person, Mr. Chen. Anyone can see that. Yes, she is. But not everyone does see it. Too many people focus on her disability first and her personality second. Robert paused, then looked directly at Jake. I have a proposition for you, and I want you to hear me out before you say anything. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had a feeling he wasn't going to like whatever came next. Lily is supposed to have a tutor and companion to help her with her studies and daily activities. The person we hired recently quit because they said Lily was difficult to work with. But I think the real problem was that they didn't respect her as a person. Jake could feel where this was going, and it made him uncomfortable. I'd like to offer you the position, Robert continued. It would include a room in our guest house, meals, a modest salary, and the opportunity to complete your high school education through our private tutoring program. After that, if you're interested, we'd help you apply for college scholarships. Jake stared at Robert in shock. Mr. Chen, I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Robert said firmly. It's a job. Lily needs someone who will challenge her, encourage her, and treat her with respect. Based on what I've seen tonight, you're exactly what she needs. And frankly, you deserve a chance to get your life back on track. But I don't have any experience. I don't know anything about working with blind people. You don't need experience with blind people. You need experience with people, period. And you've already shown you have that. Robert leaned forward. Jake, I'm a businessman. I don't make offers like this lightly. I'm offering you this job because I believe you're the right person for it, not because I feel sorry for you. Jake's mind was racing. The offer was more than he'd ever dreamed possible, but it also scared him. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he let them down? Can I think about it? Jake asked. Of course, but I hope you'll say yes. Lily could use a friend like you, and you could use a fresh start. When they returned to the living room, Jake found Lily and Susan looking through photo albums. Lily was running her fingers over the pictures while Susan described them in detail. This is from your 16th birthday party, Susan was saying. You're wearing that blue dress you loved, and you're smiling so big. I remember that dress, Lily said softly. I felt so pretty that day. You were beautiful, Susan said. You still are. Mom, do you really think I could be a teacher someday? Lily asked suddenly. Susan looked surprised by the question. Honey, we've talked about this. It would be very difficult with your condition. But Jake thinks I could do it, Lily said. He thinks I'd be good at it. Jake felt all eyes turn to him. I do think that, he said carefully. I think you'd be great at it. You're patient, you listen well, and you understand what it's like to face challenges. Those are exactly the qualities good teachers need. Susan looked thoughtful. Maybe we should look into programs for teachers with visual impairments. There might be more options than we realized. The hope in Lily's voice was unmistakable. Really? You'd help me research it? Of course, sweetheart. If it's what you really want, we'll figure out how to make it happen. As the evening wound down, Jake realized something had shifted in the Chen household. There was more laughter, more hope, more possibility in the air than there had been when he first walked through their gates. When Robert offered to have a driver take Jake back to the city, Jake hesitated. He looked around at this warm, welcoming family, at Lily's hopeful face, at the opportunities being offered to him. Mr. Chen, Jake said finally. About that job offer. Yes? Could I start with a trial period? Maybe a week or two, just to see if it works out for everyone? Robert smiled. I think that's a very wise approach. Really? Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands together. You're going to stay? For a trial period, Jake said, but he was smiling too. As Susan showed him to the guest house, Jake couldn't help but think about his grandmother. He could almost hear her voice telling him that sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as simple acts of kindness. He'd helped a lost girl find her way home, and somehow in the process he'd found a way home himself. 6 months had passed since that rainy night when Jake first met Lily, and his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The guest house had become his home, and the Chen family had become something he'd never really had before. A real family. Jake woke up every morning in his own bed, in his own room, with clean clothes in the closet and food in the kitchen. It still felt like a dream sometimes. He'd catch himself looking around and wondering if it was all too good to be true, if somehow it would all disappear and he'd be back on the streets again. But every day the feeling grew stronger that this was real. This was his life now. The tutoring program had been challenging at first. Jake had missed so much school during his months on the streets that catching up seemed impossible. But Mrs. Patterson, his tutor, was patient and encouraging. She helped him work through the gaps in his education, and slowly but surely, Jake began to feel confident about his studies again. You're naturally smart, Jake, she told him one afternoon as they finished a particularly difficult math lesson. You just needed someone to believe in you and give you the right support. The best part of his new life, though, was working with Lily. What had started as a job had quickly become a genuine friendship. Jake helped her with her mobility training, walking with her through the neighborhood and teaching her to navigate new routes independently. They studied together, with Jake reading textbooks aloud and Lily helping him understand concepts he struggled with. But more than that, they talked. Really talked. About their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Lily had slowly started to believe in herself again, and Jake had learned that having people who cared about him made everything easier. I got accepted, Lily announced one morning, bursting into the kitchen where Jake was eating breakfast. Accepted to what? Jake asked, though he had a pretty good idea what she was talking about. The education program at the University of Washington. They have a special track for students with disabilities who want to become teachers. I start in the fall. Jake jumped up from his chair and hugged her, both of them laughing with excitement. Lily, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. I couldn't have done it without you, she said. You're the one who made me believe it was possible. Robert and Susan came into the kitchen, both beaming with pride. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, Susan said, kissing her daughter's forehead. And Jake, Robert added, we have some news for you too. Jake felt his stomach flutter with nerves. Good news or bad news? With the Chen family, it was usually good, but old habits from his difficult past made him worry. Your tutor says you're ready to take your high school equivalency exam, Robert continued. If you pass, you'll have your diploma by summer. Jake felt a rush of pride and excitement. Really? Mrs. Patterson thinks I'm ready? More than ready, Susan said. She says you're one of the most dedicated students she's ever worked with. But Robert wasn't finished. There's something else. Susan and I have been talking, and we'd like to make you an official part of our family. Jake's heart stopped. What do you mean? We'd like to adopt you, Susan said softly. If you're interested. You're already like a son to us, and Lily thinks of you as her brother. We'd love to make it legal. Jake stared at them, his mind struggling to process what they'd just said. Adoption? A real family? Parents who actually wanted him? But I'm almost 18, he said weakly. Isn't it too late for adoption? Not in Washington State, Robert said, and age doesn't matter anyway. Family isn't about age or paperwork. It's about love and commitment. Jake felt tears starting to form in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Lily exclaimed. Please, Jake. We all want you to be our family for real. Jake looked around at these three people who had saved his life in more ways than one. 6 months ago, he'd been alone, hungry and hopeless. Now he had a home, an education, people who loved him, and a future that looked brighter than anything he'd ever dared to imagine. Yes, he said quietly. Yes. I'd love to be part of your family. The celebration that followed was loud and joyful. Susan cried happy tears. Robert shook his hand formally and then pulled him into a bear hug, and Lily danced around the kitchen cheering. Later that evening, as they sat on the back patio watching the sunset, Jake found himself thinking about his grandmother, Rose. He wished she could see him now, could see how her lessons about kindness and helping others had led him to this moment. She'd be proud of you, Lily said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. How did you know I was thinking about her? You get quiet in a certain way when you think about your grandmother, like you're listening to something the rest of us can't hear. Jake smiled. Lily's ability to understand people had only gotten stronger over the months they'd spent together. I think she would be proud. She always said that good things happen to people who try to do right by others. She was smart, Lily said. Look at us. You helped a lost girl and ended up finding a family. I was lost in more ways than one, and you helped me find my way back to myself. We helped each other, Jake corrected. The legal adoption process took a few more months, but finally, on a sunny day in early spring, Jake officially became Jake Chen. Standing in the courthouse with his new family, holding his adoption certificate, Jake felt a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. But the best was yet to come. That fall, both Jake and Lily started college. Jake had decided to study social work and business, planning to one day start a program to help homeless teenagers get back on their feet. Lily began her education courses, determined to become the teacher she'd always dreamed of being. On their first day of classes, Jake walked Lily to her building, just like he'd been doing for months as they practiced navigating the campus. You ready for this? He asked as they stood outside her classroom. More ready than I've ever been, Lily said confidently. What about you? Same, Jake said. I've got a good feeling about the future. As Jake walked to his own classes, he thought about the chain of events that had brought him here. One act of kindness on a rainy night had changed everything. He'd learned that sometimes when you help someone else find their way, you end up finding your own way too. 3 years later, Jake graduated with honors and started his nonprofit organization for homeless youth. Lily became a beloved teacher at a local elementary school, known for her patience and ability to help struggling students believe in themselves. The Chen family often talked about that rainy night when their lives intersected. They'd all been lost in different ways, Jake without a home, Lily without hope, and Robert and Susan watching their daughter fade away. But somehow they'd found each other and discovered that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice, love, and the willingness to see the best in each other. And every time Jake helped a homeless teenager find housing, education, or hope, he remembered his grandmother's words about helping others. He understood now that kindness creates ripples that spread far beyond what you can see, touching lives in ways you might never know. The lost had found each other, and in doing so, they'd all found their way home.